Nintendo's The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild was released in 2017 and takes the game's formula back to its roots while introducing new elements as an open-world story game. The main plot takes place in a post-apocalyptic Hyrule after the kingdom failed to stop the evil Ganondorf 100 years ago, only being able to seal him away after the destruction of the kingdom. The story follows present-day Link as he journeys to reclaim the kingdom's corrupt powers and discover his lost memories, while surviving the lawless wilds. In this video, we will analyze the game through its creative use of art and narratology. Breath of the Wild's open world is beautiful and captivating, due largely in part to the game's use of the elements and principles of art, particularly form, value, space, color, and texture, and principles such as unity and scale, as seen in books by R. Poland. The game also possesses a unique cel-shaded art style, with slight caricaturist elements. These design aspects can be seen in all areas of the game, as Zelda World displays many large and small assets from different regions of the map, while maintaining a sense of unity and open space. The use of cel-shading textures, lighter tones, and slight caricaturist models also help the game maintain its visual fidelity, despite the hardware constraints that would struggle under photorealism. The combination of these elements and principles shows how Breath of the Wild's map uses visual art elements and principles effectively. Breath of the Wild makes effective use of sound design in its open world, but takes a different approach from other Zelda games, trading the traditionally more attention-grabbing music for understated ambient music, with more emphasis on environmental sounds. Supporting research found that between image and sound quality was perceived to be more impactful on gameplay, and that the loss of sound negatively affected players' ability to orient themselves within the game. Breath of the Wild's sound design allows for players to interpret the world clearly while setting themes with ambient music. This is due to the game giving unique sounds to many individual parts of the game instead of reusing them. This, combined with the use of non-invasive ambient music, shows how Breath of the Wild uses the art of sound design effectively as part of its world. Moving on to narratology, Breath of the Wild's story structure heavily uses the hero's journey model of storytelling. As seen in popular fiction and research, the hero's journey model can vary, but typically follows an average individual in a mundane, familiar setting, until a call to action requires the individual to leave their familiar world for an unknown one. During this time, the hero will typically encounter some form of aid, normally supernatural, on their journey. After this, the hero will leave their known world for an unknown world, facing obstacles that begin the hero's transformation, culminating in a substantial victory that does not resolve the story, such as the destruction of the first Death Star. This event changes the hero and prepares them for the final half of the story. After this, the hero may receive rewards and attempt to return to their ordinary life, before confronting and rising to the final challenge, and returning to their known world, completing the loop. Breath of the Wild accounts for player agency but follows this basic structure with a slightly modified beginning, as the player begins the game after Link failed 100 years prior. Despite having left his known world long ago, he must leave his new mundane world on the plateau, receiving aid from the ghost of the King of Hyrule, before completing the trials of the Divine Beasts, claiming the Master Sword, which can be viewed as the midway victory, and rewards for the hero before finally confronting Ganondorf. Although the story is mainly completed after Ganondorf's defeat, the game still uses the hero's journey model for storytelling incredibly effectively. Breath of the Wild uses embedded narrative incredibly well in its storytelling. Embedded narrative is often described as a smaller story taking place within a larger story, and Breath of the Wild has many smaller stories throughout the game's many side quests. However, the most apparent embedded narrative in Breath of the Wild is the story of the protagonist Link, told to the player through flashbacks collected as memories. These allow the player to better relate to Link and the world, and research suggests storytelling like this may have positive effects on players. This sub-story told throughout the game is an excellent example of how Breath of the Wild uses embedded narratives in its larger story effectively. Breath of the Wild's story uses evoked narrative very effectively as it draws from many other titles in the series. Evoked narrative is the reference of a separate existing story. Breath of the Wild has many examples of this as the game draws from important plot locations from previous Zelda works, such as Long Long Ranch from Ocarina of Time or Spectacle Rock from the original Legend of Zelda, and plot points from other games such as Twilight Princess or Skyward Sword. Research supports the belief that using evoked narrative like this is useful as it gives the game narratives that can be explored outside of the main story, and helps give the world a sense of cohesiveness. All these narrative choices show how Breath of the Wild uses evoked narrative effectively. As discussed and expanded upon, The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild is an excellent example of art and narrative in video games. Thank you for watching.